So there was a question that we got before the show, Heath. Which CONMEBOL team, which team in South America is most comparable to the U.S. men's national team? And I actually had to think on this. If you want me to go first, I'm happy to do so. But
you're gonna say Uruguay or Chile?
No, I actually go with Ecuador.
Okay.
Ecuador has a lot of young players. I think they almost got out of the round or out of the group stage. They drew with Netherlands in the group A, in the World Cup in Qatar. They beat Qatar. They drew with Netherlands 1-1, and all they had to do was get a draw against Senegal in their last game, and they gave up that goal 20 minutes left to Koulibaly, whose first ever goal for Senegal. But they were in that game. Now, they're heavily reliant on Enner Valencia, who's like 75 years old. He's like my age. He played back in the 1950 World Cup as well, and he just scores goals every time he plays. But when I look at their younger players, they've got a lot of, like, Hincapié, who plays at Bayer Leverkusen, 24-year-old center back. You have Stupinian, who plays at Brighton. He's 25. You have Moises Caicedo.
The whole team plays at Brighton.
Yeah, they all basically play at Brighton. and they're just super talented, Ecuador, across the board. And I think this experience for their young players in 2022 is really going to bode well for 24 in Copa America and 26 as well. So I kind of liken us to them because you can see they're on the precipice of really taking a big step. And I think we're the same. And we can't compare ourselves to Brazil and Argentina. Yeah. And when I look at Uruguay and Chile, like, they're just moving past an older generation and trying to recycle. So it felt like Ecuador might be the best fit. Colombia might be another one, though, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot.
I mean, I think, but I think Colombia generally have more, what I think is technical ability than the U.S. does over time. I mean, now again, we're talking about a new generation, so maybe I'm stuck in the old ways. But my thing about when I think about I don't mean more technical. I don't mean more technical ability than the U.S. like player for player, but I mean from a style of play, they want to be more technical than the U.S. is at the moment, right? In terms of a system or a style of play, I don't mean actual player for player like abilities. Whereas the U.S., I think when you start to look at, again, you take out Brazil and Argentina out of CONMEBOL, I would love to see the U.S. in that type of environment, because the grit, the fight that you'll get from a Uruguay, that you'll get from a Paraguay, that you'll get from a Ecuador, like you mentioned, from a Peru, like you're talking, these are difficult environments that they go into, and the style of play, they're very, very physical. And I really like that about, but I think the U.S. also is a physical team, and we've always had that physical DNA in us. It's just a matter of being able to now, against another team that wants to be physical, how do we dictate the style against them? If they want to be physical, how do we become a little more technical and control the flow of the game a little bit? And so I like the Ecuador shout. I like the Colombia shout. I personally like, even when I'm thinking about like a Uruguay, just again, less so like these teams that it's hard to separate. I put a lot of those teams actually into the category with the U.S. versus a Argentina or Brazil, who are going to not only be physical, but also dictate the game, control the flow of the game, that type of thing. I'm not sure where you think, Charlie, in terms of who the U.S. most resembles in CONMEBOL.
In terms of us seeing them play against Uruguay and Colombia, right? We saw them play last year against Uruguay, what that looked like in the summer, and then Colombia just now in this January camp. And of course, it was a young U.S. team, but also a very young Colombia team. So I think when the U.S. are at their best, they're very comparable to an Uruguay. I think that'd be a great match in terms of two top teams, but they're not U.S. doesn't have a Lionel Messi is what it comes down to, right? So Argentina, the difference between Argentina and the World Cup versus a lot of teams was Lionel Messi. He was the difference maker. And then Brazil, they have so many attacking options, and Casemiro holding it down the midfield is just a well-established team. They have talent all over the roster in every single spot, but they obviously didn't play well as a team. They didn't defend well as a team, and the transition game is what ultimately made them pay the price, because they were attacking with 6, defending with 4, attacking with 5, defending with 5. It wasn't fluid. But I think at times we don't give the U.S. enough credit, and at times I think we give them too much credit. So we just have to find a good line. But remember, our group is still growing. We have, I could say at least 9-10 players who still have a lot left to go to fulfill their potential, whereas we've seen players who are as good as they're going to get, right? They're playing, a Walker Zimmerman, for instance, he's not going to get that. He's at his peak. Like, we can't expect for him to take this massive jump. Whereas Yunus Musa, Serginho Dest, even Christian Pulisic, they can take it up a whole nother notch. And so we're just waiting for that to happen. They have to be in the obviously the right club environment, but also stay healthy. That's a big one.
All right, for everybody that wants to join in on this conversation, hit us up on Twitter, ISWT Pod. Which South American team do you think is most comparable to the U.S. men's national team? And obviously hit us up on the YouTube comments as well. We'd like to get your thoughts. All right, so there was something you said, Heath, about physicality being in our DNA. And I paused and thought about that and processed it while I'm listening.
Maybe that's not the right word.
No. Fight. But I'm just saying, like, when I look at this group, I don't physicality.
Have you seen Charlie's thighs? That man likes to get into a scrap, dude.
Dude, those are
Hey,
Charlie was the number one on his JV wrestling team, dude. That guy's
Quadzilla, dude. Quadzillas. But
hey, wrestling is no joke. I'll tell you that right now.
I just when I think about this group, I don't think physical. And I think that's a good thing. I'm glad we're evolving from that particular stereotype of they're just known for fight and scrap. And I think you need to have that, right? Even the top teams, even the Argentinas that just won the World Cup, they have that. But they also have the element and the ability to put the ball down on the ground and play. And as you mentioned, Messi helps out a lot.
I would just say, in terms of European coaches and scouts that I've come across in my lifetime, they're always super excited about the American player because of the work ethic. So right. Yes, you have the athleticism, which typically is amongst the best in the world. And the fight, the physicality, because they're used to it. It's that working class blue collar feel that they think of when thinking about American athletes. But it's the work ethic. They feel any American that comes overseas, they have this work ethic. They didn't make it yet. They're trying to make it. So they're coming to scrap. They're going to fight. They're going to do all the extra training. Whereas some of the local talent, and I can speak in terms of some of the younger talent in France that I've seen, super gifted. I mean, incredible technical ability and tactically, but sometimes don't have the work ethic. And there's so many of those players that just fall through because they've had it so easy for so long and haven't really had to push themselves. And finally, when they have to push themselves, they're like, I'm good. Whereas the American player goes over and they just want to fight, and they maybe lack the technical ability a little bit, or the tactical, which we see a lot of players go over and they go, oh, I wasn't aware of how important tactics are and your body positioning and where you are on the field and how that makes your job easier and makes your team's job easier. So I think that's starting to slowly change because we have a lot of, I think, better qualified coaches now in the youth setup in this country. But more importantly, our youth are going over to Europe at a much earlier age, which obviously we're seeing the benefits of.
So there's a comment here, Heath, from S27. What's up, S? Who says American players tend to be humble, so tend to be more coachable. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know if Americans are more coachable. I think we're getting into an era of level of players that players know they're good from a young age, and it's going to come down to each of the players and the environments and their personality types. I don't think that we are a DNA of person that just makes us coachable, because we've all played with plenty of uncoachable players. Yeah. But I do think there is a culture of team that comes into the American mentality of growing up in team sports and being in team environments. And also very, very, I don't want to say rarely, but our story isn't always for the American player of a rags to riches, where that selfishness is on a level of survival. Right. So I think there's just a different type of aspect, I think, of that of the American type of player. So I agree with that in a lot of ways, but yeah, I don't want to slap a kind of a stamp on
slap it, Heath. Slap it. We want you to
put the stamp.
We want more stereotypes. More stereotypes. Slap that. I was gonna say something.
That's going right in social media. The you slapping. Slap. Stamp.